And now I'd like to invite the speakers up just for a quick panel session. We've got a few minutes here, so round of applause. So now, unfortunately, Tim Payne was unavailable today, which is why Loretta presented the session, the content around erosion. So we don't really want to answer any of those questions, and instead we'd be happy to pass those questions on to Tim, because he is the expert in, we don't want to put ourselves in the hole there. So, but we would absolutely be happy to discuss any other topic. And I said the very top question is, in fact, about theirs is the second. Richard, how well do your surveys of willingness to pay for ecosystem services represent what people would actually pay when asked for money?
Okay. So this is actually based on science, and it's called the economic valuation. So when we interview people, we actually tell them that, hey, it is perfectly okay to have a willingness to pay of zero. What we are after are your honest opinions. So yeah, and then we also try to carefully, create the questionnaire. We've done focus groups. We interview experts. So we actually present, respondents with a really, plausible or valid valuation scenario. So. And then we also interviewed, more than 1,000 respondents. So I think that's a representative sample in New Zealand. And we also have this published in peer-reviewed journal. So I think it's quite robust. And there's actually some, so we can actually discuss further about the, the robustness of the willingness to pay. It's because it's actually been used all over the world. And we try to make it, better and better every time we do it.
So we'll carry on with you, Richard. Just a question around how was pig hunting valued, and is that in an estate level?
Do you have? Oh, okay. So yeah, that's that we have already written a report and also an article in the New Zealand Journal of Forestry. So we based the pig hunting on the meat that got caught. So we need to actually provide us, this pig hunting database, which is quite yummy, really. So lots of numbers there, and then I used the assumption that each pig caught, it's like there's a certain weight for each pig, and then I've estimated the $250,000. So it's actually about $16 per hectare. So and I compared it with the literature. It's actually quite similar to what we have in literature. So I think the estimate is quite good for the Winita in terms of pig hunting. But there are also other hunting values that I also estimated. So we have recreational hunting of deer and also biodiversity value. So that they're all in the report. So if you'd like more details.
Okay, I can see we've got another question here. Just has work been done on the environmental benefits of converting pine forests to native? And I think this could be answered by a few people up on the board here potentially. Anyone want to have a start? Yep.
Yep. I'm not aware of work that has been done on looking at converting pine to native, but it's something that we definitely want to do. We have put a proposal forward, I think, in the past, but it didn't move forward. But yeah, it is something that for some sites where access is difficult and you're left for the number of options of abandoning or converting or some other option, converting to native is something that, we should be looking at.
Again, now we'll just like to throw it open to anyone who doesn't have access. So there we go, yep.
There was a diagram of the different roots from the different species. Do any species root mesh?
You mean root grafting?
Yeah.
The answer, I think, is yes. Tree species do actually graft, and I do know that redwood trees have a lot more finer roots than some other trees, so therefore their soil cohesion ability is higher. Yeah.
Anyone else from the floor right now? Right, we'll go back to our block of questions here. So I think we've got one at the top there. So I can't quite see the tail end of it, but it starts. Richard, do you have any information on the number of non-native forest blocks planted for carbon credits without the intention to manage and harvest the trees?
So we have done the work for the Ohiwa catchment in Bay of Plenty. So we look at carbon provided by planted forests, and carbon provided by native forests. So usually, if you want trees to be planted permanently, then you will have a higher avoided erosion value, and also in terms of carbon, it should also be a little bit higher. So there's actually a formula that we can talk about in detail about how we calculate for the carbon credits. But the other thing that I'd like to mention is that what I'm trying to value here is the non-market value of carbon sequestration, because I think in the ETS you only consider the post-89 forests. But in this case, the way I value carbon sequestration is that we're looking at like a 9 declining yield. So it's basically you have continuous planting of trees. So that's how I put a value on carbon sequestration, which is basically the non-market value of carbon.
Okay, so next we've got one flag for Loretta, but I think it might be more suited to Amanda there. So are radiata genotype water use efficiency differences likely to be significant in terms of overall catchment water yields compared to interception effects, or is genotype really only a tool for maintaining or enhancing forest productivity in dry areas?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So the results that you saw earlier from the genotype differences and water use efficiency are from one of the accelerator trials. So those are really early results from quite young trees. It certainly has a lot of potential, as you could see in that graph. There was some very significant differences, but we haven't done we haven't done any work yet sort of looking at on a catchment scale. But I am going to take this opportunity to give a bit of a plug for Forest Flows. So we have a MBIE Endeavour Fund that was just funded this year, which is actually looking essentially at this question. So looking at forest hydrology in planted forests in New Zealand, and we will be looking at genotype differences and species differences in terms of water use and water yield, and also the processes behind that. So essentially watch this space, and 5 years from now, we'll be able to give you a lot more information around that question.
So another question we have here, probably for Richard and Loretta, are the FIF and NUBARM models available for use by foresters to help them make better decisions, or are they still research tools?
Okay, I'll go first. So FIF is there. So FIF, we've been constantly developing FIF, and so at the moment it is basically ArcGIS based, and so at the moment it's mainly a research tool because there are lots of assumptions. So as much as possible, we actually would like to come up with an online version, but I think at the moment it still remains as a research tool. So it needs to have a lot of research inputs from economists and geospatial analysts, but I think probably eventually we will have a web-based FIF tool, which is basically still we're planning to develop over the next years.
In NUBARM, there is a very generalised version in Forecaster that can be used now by anyone who has access to Forecaster. Going forward, I would like to see NUBARM in an easy-to-use sort of interface that anyone can get access to freely. So if you're willing to express your opinions strongly that you would like to have access to NUBARM, it may sway some funding opportunities towards us, and we will be able to make this happen.
Well, I'd just like to use the time we've got remaining just to ask the panel members, just 1 minute each, sounds about right, just to say what area of research they would most like to see pursued to further enhance the sustainability of New Zealand forests, or New Zealand planted forests. So we'll start at the end, Richard.
Sorry, I was really sorry.
So what area of research you'd most like to see in the future to continue supporting and enhancing the sustainability of the New Zealand planted forest estate? 1 minute.
One of them. Okay, so I think application of ecosystem service, I think, would really help, in the certification. I've actually attended the World Congress in Brazil, and I've attended a session on, ecosystem services certification and sustainable forest management. And there seems to be a lot of things going on in that space. If you look at FSC, it's looking at, how do you incorporate the ecosystem services. It's not just FSC, but also PFC. So I think it would be helpful, to continue with that research. I actually gave a presentation there, and there was a forest manager who has like 10,000 hectares of forest in Brazil, and he told me they would like to get that FSC certified. Maybe the FIF can be used to quantify provide the ecosystem services so that they could get certified or maybe eventually renew their certification in the long run.
I guess for me, in terms of long-term sustainability, the more we can continue to understand what the microbes are doing has real impacts for climate change. So being able to understand that stuff a lot more would be really beneficial for the future.
I think the Forest Flow program is a step in the right direction. It's going to look at the full hydrological system, so we know what's actually coming in right from the rainfall with regards to water quality, and it's probably a first program where we're going to be looking at water quality and water quantity together.
I'm going to carry on from Brenda because, as you mentioned, Forest Flows is amazing. It's going to answer a lot of the questions that we have right now around hydrology, and not just input-output, but processes, which is really important to actually understand what's going on. And I think a wonderful complement to that study would be to look at nitrogen cycling processes at the same time. So we're looking at water quality to understand the other soil nitrogen cycling processes that go alongside that would add a lot to our understanding and our ability to be able to predict what's going on in terms of nitrogen in the forest.
Yeah, I think an ecosystem is quite complex, and there's much we don't understand about interactions between different things in the ecosystem. Often we focus on maybe the tree or the soil or one other thing in that ecosystem, but it's joining it all together and seeing that bigger picture to actually understand, as Amanda said, the process of what is actually happening, how is the soil interacting with something else that's in that environment. And I just cannot emphasise enough the value of long-term trials. My career has piggybacked on the back of something that was installed in the 80s and 90s when I wasn't even thinking about my career. And that trial, the LTSP trial, has really come to its value in this program and given us what we often can't get, which is time. It's the time that to have something occur in the ecosystem to be able to measure change. And we are in a long-term production system of forestry. So yeah, long-term trials, keep them coming.
Well, I'd like everyone to thank the presenters for their excellent comments and content, so thanks very much. And now we'll hand back over to Peter Clinton and Brian Strahm.